A new challenge in the South China Sea as more U.S. allies move through the region. What could this mean for China's territorial claims? This is China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for the latest China news and click the notification bell so you get an alert each time we publish a new episode. If you want to understand China's military ambitions, look no further than the South China Sea.
The South China Sea is one of the busiest and most militarized shipping routes in the world. Experts also believe a wealth of oil and gas is lying below the area's surface. China claims almost all of this body of water for itself.
Now obviously, most countries along the South China Sea don't agree with that claim. But they're not the ones who built artificial islands in the middle of it, or put rocket launchers on them. And if you thought that was scary, you haven't seen China's new artificial island theme park. For years, the US has been challenging the Chinese Communist Party's claims by sending in warships to disputed waters. They're called Freedom of Navigation Operations, or FONOPs. There's already been 2 FONOPs this year. The most recent one was just this past week. 2 U.S. warships sailed within 12 nautical miles of the Mischief Reef, part of the Spratly Islands, which Brunei, Malaysia, the Philippines, Vietnam, and of course, China claim. 12 nautical miles off the coast is important because that's the edge of what China calls its rightful territorial waters, and the other countries call nuh-uh. Obviously, China was not happy with the move.
The U.S. insisted on stirring up trouble in the South China Sea, creating tension to harm peace and security in the South China Sea, which is unpopular.
Yes, it was unpopular with Chinese leadership, but for other countries, it is pretty popular. And now, U.S. allies are getting in on the FONOPS fun. The UK is sending its newest aircraft carrier to the Pacific. The UK Defense Secretary also floated the idea of its own military bases in Southeast Asia. And it's not just the UK. Australia has sent its warships through the South China Sea too. Even Canada has. I have to admit, I didn't even know that Canada had warships. I just assumed that any time Canada faced a conflict at sea, they just apologized and offered everyone maple syrup and poutine. But seriously, battle lines are being drawn in the South China Sea. The top U.S. commander in the Indo-Pacific, Admiral Philip Davidson, recently said in a Senate Armed Service Committee hearing that China is the greatest long-term strategic threat to a free and open Indo-Pacific and to the United States. And he said it's not just a matter of the U.S. competing with a rising China. Davidson said, "I believe we are facing something even more serious, a fundamental divergence in values that leads to 2 incompatible visions of the future." That's pretty bleak. But there is another option, a future that's not dominated by the US or China. The answer, of course, is Cthulhu. And for all of you fans of non-Euclidean geometry, now is the time when I answer a question from a fan who supports China Uncensored on the crowdfunding website Patreon. Venomous422 asks, do you think the US-Chinese relations will have a chance to improve during the current Chinese president's life, or is he against the U.S. completely? That's an interesting question, especially as the U.S. and China are knee-deep in trade talks. When you say during the current Chinese president's life, you're probably referring to how Xi Jinping removed term limits so he could continue to be president indefinitely. He's only 65 years old now, so let's just say he's got another 20 years. In that time, we'll have at least 2 more U.S. presidents after Trump that will have to deal with Xi Jinping. We don't know what those U.S. presidents will be like, so it's hard to predict how they'll deal with him or with China. It's also possible that Xi Jinping will get ousted because of internal political infighting. It's hard to say what Xi Jinping personally thinks about the U.S. The Chinese Communist Party as a whole definitely sees the U.S. as an adversary, and their current trajectory to gaining more power internationally depends on subverting the U.S. and other Western democracies. But that's kind of backfiring, because now there's a fundamental shift going on in how many Western democracies are viewing the Chinese Communist Party. I think overall, U.S.-China relations will only improve if Xi Jinping can start making the fundamental systemic changes the U.S. wants. But that's the kind of change that's hard for an authoritarian regime to make. So as long as the Chinese Communist Party stays in power, I think a fundamental improvement in U.S.-China relations is not going to happen. Thanks for your question, Venomous422. So, why am I answering questions on the show? It's because a lot of advertisers don't dare to work with a show that criticizes the Chinese Communist Party. So, we rely on support from viewers like you on the crowdfunding website Patreon. Answering your questions on the show is one of my way of saying thanks. So, head over to patreon.com/China Uncensored to find out how you can help. Thanks for watching. Once again, I'm your host, Chris Chappell. See you next time.